For years, I lived quietly on my Texas ranch, to 200 acres of open land, passed down through generations. I kept to myself, raised cattle, and watched the horizon like my father used to. But I wasn't just a rancher. I was also a strategist. I knew one day, someone greedy would come knocking. So I prepared. I made sure every deed was airtight. Every survey, every legal document, locked and loaded. I didn't advertise my ownership. I let the land speak for itself. And then, one day, the silence broke. A convoy of trucks rolled in. Construction crews, surveyors, and then, the signs went up. Future site of Sterling Grove, a tiny home community. I didn't say a word. It was like a circus, rolled in overnight. The HOA, a company called Sterling Grove Development, held a ribbon-cutting ceremony right there on my land, without ever talking to me. There were balloons, real estate agents in suits, news cameras. They called it a revolutionary new community of 89 tiny homes, and bragged about how fast they'd move in new families. They sold contracts worth millions, and not one of those buyers knew they were walking onto a trap. One of the developers finally approached me, all smiles. "You're going to love what we've done here," he said, as if I were a guest at my own funeral. "This is progress, partner. Time to step aside." I nodded, silent. Behind my calm stare, I was already counting down. Within weeks, the HOA had transformed my quiet land into a bustling construction zone. Tiny homes popped up row by row, each with white picket fences and freshly painted doors. They weren't just building, they were selling. Sterling Grove announced they'd sold, contracts totaling $15 million. Families lined up to stake their claim. They even hosted a live stream tour, boasting about exclusive Texas Hill country living. They didn't know that every contract, every sale, was built on stolen ground. I watched it all unfold from my porch, sipping coffee, as the gears of their fantasy kept spinning. Behind the scenes, my legal trap was already set. Paperwork, signatures, timestamps, the kind that turns an empire to ash. I wasn't just waiting, I was gathering proof. They called it theirs. The developers printed glossy brochures with aerial shots of my ranch, branding it as Sterling Grove Estates. They even registered the name with the county, claiming ownership in interviews and online ads. But behind the scenes, I was quietly meeting with my lawyer, going over every detail of my deed and the boundaries they'd crossed. It was all legal, signed, notarized, filed, and now, the paper trail they ignored was about to become their downfall. Neighbors started asking questions. "Didn't you own this land?" they'd whisper. I'd nod, smile, and say, "Still do." But I let the HOA spin their fantasy deeper into delusion, because I knew the deeper they went, the harder they'd fall. They didn't know it yet, but the storm was coming. I didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, I sent quiet warnings, a formal letter from my lawyer, certified mail with property records, deeds with my name stamped clear as day. Sterling Grove ignored everything. One executive even called my lawyer a distraction. They went on building. They added model homes, sales booths, and even set dates for open house events. To them, I was just some old rancher, a footnote in their grand plan. They were too busy chasing profits to see the cliff ahead. Each time I saw another home go up, I didn't get angry. I got more focused. Every wall they built on my land was another nail in their coffin, and soon they'd realize I wasn't bluffing. The HOA started posting no trespassing signs on my land. They hired security to patrol, warning neighbors to stay out unless they had contracts. It was surreal watching strangers guard property they didn't own, but I didn't flinch. Instead, my attorney filed a cease and desist letter, clear language, concrete dates, deed numbers, county records. It was the first punch, and it landed hard. A copy went to the HOA, the county registrar, and the local news station. The trap was now officially sprung. Sterling Grove panicked. They held emergency meetings, called in their own lawyers, and tried to discredit my ownership. But every paper they produced was either fake, incomplete, or legally invalid. I watched them scramble. I wasn't just reclaiming my land, I was dismantling their empire, one document at a time. 3 months passed, 89 homes completed. Sterling Grove had a full marketing campaign in motion. Families signed leases. Mortgage lenders approved loans. Even local officials praised the development for revitalizing the area. And then came the moment I was waiting for. I filed a formal complaint: land theft, illegal construction, fraudulent sales. Every shred of evidence was backed by timestamps, maps, and legal documents. My attorney filed an injunction that same morning. The court granted a freeze on all activities. It was like yanking the curtain at the end of a magic trick. Developers were caught mid-sale. Buyers were told their dream homes stood on stolen land. Sterling Grove panicked. Their calls and emails flooded my lawyer's office. But I wasn't negotiating. They didn't realize. This was never about revenge. This was about reclaiming what was mine. The injunction hit Sterling Grove like a thunderclap. Construction halted. Real estate deals evaporated. Buyers pulled out. Furious they'd invested in a scam. The media that once praised them now ran headlines calling it the Texas tiny home fiasco. The developers scrambled to prove their innocence. They claimed it was a clerical error, a misunderstanding. But the evidence was too strong, too precise. Every survey they'd ignored, every record they hadn't checked, now pointed straight at their failure. HOA board members began to resign. Investors backed out. Lawsuits rolled in from families who wanted their money back, with interest. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was millions in damages. And I watched it all unfold, calmly, methodically. This wasn't luck. This was justice, by design. Weeks later, Sterling Grove found itself in court, not once, but in multiple cases. Property theft, fraud, breach of zoning laws. Every developer, every executive tied to the HOA, was summoned. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, angry families, even rival developers, came to watch the downfall. Sterling Grove's lawyers tried. Everything technicalities, counterclaims, emotional appeals. But my evidence was too strong. The judge didn't even hesitate. He declared their entire operation illegal. Every home built without consent, every sale void. The development was ordered to cease immediately. Fines mounted into the millions. And the cherry on top, they were instructed to return the land to its rightful owner, me. I didn't gloat. I just nodded, knowing justice had spoken louder than I ever could. Just when Sterling Grove thought the worst was behind them, the IRS came knocking. Turns out, they hadn't just built illegally, they'd also messed up their books, unreported income, shady offshore accounts, under-the-table payments to contractors. The audits were brutal. Executives were slapped with tax evasion charges. Penalties stretched into millions more. And this time, it wasn't just civil court. Federal agents got involved. One board member tried to flee the country. Another turned whistleblower, leaking internal emails and payment logs. The HOA that once bragged about changing lives was now choking on its own greed. And me. I stayed quiet. The land was mine again. The silence returned, sweeter than ever. Just when the remains of Sterling Grove couldn't look more tragic, Mother Nature chimed in. A flash flood, fierce and unforgiving, tore through the area. Heavy rain had soaked the foundations, and the rushed construction hadn't followed proper drainage codes. Roads collapsed. Homes shifted off their slabs. Furniture and debris floated in muddy currents. Some families had just moved in. Others were still unpacking. Now they were knee-deep in water and lawsuits. The media called it a symbolic cleansing. Locals whispered that the land was reclaiming itself. But I knew better. It wasn't a curse. It was a consequence. Sterling Grove had stolen land, broken laws, and ignored warnings. The flood wasn't revenge. It was reality, catching up after the lawsuits, the fines, the floods. What remained of Sterling Grove was rubble, empty lots, abandoned homes, silence. The same silence I'd once cherished on my ranch returned, but this time it carried a new weight. Justice, vindication. I walked the land again. Each step felt heavier, more sacred. I saw patches of wildflowers sprouting, where construction debris used to lie. Nature was healing, and so was the legacy of my family's land. Reporters reached out. Some called me a hero. Others wanted to make documentaries, but I wasn't interested in fame. I'd won by staying silent, by trusting the law, and by believing that truth, when armed with patience, always prevails. Sterling Grove had vanished. My land remained, and its story, our story, would endure long after their concrete washed away. I used to think justice had to be loud, courtroom battles, media headlines, shouting matches, but this experience taught me something deeper. Justice whispers. It moves slowly, patiently. It waits for the right moment to strike, and when it does, it leaves behind lessons, carved into stone. I didn't just reclaim my land. I reclaimed the power of silence, of preparation, of staying true to my roots. Sterling Grove collapsed because greed blinded them. I succeeded because history guided me. My father taught me that the land listens. Every fence post and patch of soil holds memory. And now, after everything, I know he was right. The land knew I'd come back. It waited for me, just like I waited for my moment. People started showing up, not developers, not buyers, but wanderers, curious travelers, history buffs, even students studying land rights. They walked the edge of the ranch where the Sterling Grove signs had once stood, asking about the man who beat the system. I never claimed that title. I just told them the truth about deeds, patience, and preparation. Some families who lost money found comfort in the story, realizing the importance of due diligence. A few even thanked me for standing firm. "You showed us what home really means," one woman said, eyes damp with grief and gratitude. I didn't set out to teach a lesson. I just protected what was mine. But somehow, my quiet fight rippled outward. A story, once buried in legal filings and muddy boots, now lived in campfire tales and whispered wisdom. I started getting letters, some handwritten, others emailed from across the country. People wanted advice. Not legal tricks or land deals, but something deeper. How do you stay ready? How do you protect what's yours without losing yourself? I didn't have a fancy answer. Staying ready means listening when no one else is. Documenting everything even when it seems boring. Trusting silence, trusting your instincts, and never underestimating those who laugh at you. Sterling Grove thought I was asleep while they dreamed of fortune, but I was awake, watching, planning. I told everyone who asked, "You don't need to shout to be strong. Strength is quiet. It's in the pages people skip and the warnings they ignore. Stay ready, and one day, your moment will speak for itself." With Sterling Grove gone, the land stood quiet, scarred, but sovereign. I didn't rush to rebuild. I walked slowly through each acre, picking up scraps of wood and memories, letting the wind decide what should remain. Neighbors offered help. Some brought seedlings, others brought fence posts. It wasn't about restoring what was lost. It was about planting something honest. A garden where lies had bloomed. A trail where greed had paved over trust. I didn't start a new business. No flashy signs. Just small steps. Repairing the barn, mending the fence, feeding the soil. And as the land healed, so did I. This time, every decision came from the heart, not from contracts, not from courtrooms. Because when you rebuild on truth, what grows can't be stolen. One morning, I stood at the edge of my ranch as the sun broke over the hills. the same hills that watched Sterling Grove rise and fall. No noise, no lawsuits, no developers, just wind, grass, and the steady rhythm of my own heartbeat. This land wasn't just a possession. It was memory, heritage, soul. It had endured trespass and turmoil, but it had never surrendered. And neither had I. I didn't need closure. The silence was enough. Every sunrise now felt like a reward, a whispered nod from the land that I had honored its story. Not with power, not with fame, but with patience. I turned back toward the porch, boots brushing the dirt. One chapter had closed, but the land was ready to write another.